Today I'm beginning my out-of-print book reviews. These are reviews of books that are literally out of print. And today I'm talking about my new favorite novel, The Passionate Journey by Irving Stone. Irving Stone was known primarily for writing historical and biographical fiction. Most famously, his novels The Agony and the Ecstasy, which is about the painter and sculptor Michelangelo, and Lust for Life, which is about Vincent van Gogh. So he had a certain penchant for artists, and The Passionate Journey is no exception. This is a novel about the American painter John Noble. I'd never heard of John Noble until I happened upon this book recently. I was attracted by the Eiffel Tower on the cover. So very few of Irving Stone's books are in print. Agony and the Ecstasy and Lust for Life are two out of, I think, maybe three that are still in print. So the majority of his books, and he wrote quite a few, are not well known and are out of print, which is unfortunate. So this dust jacket is a little bit cheesy, so I actually like to remove it, and it's not attached to the back portion anyway. That's what happens when you get kind of an old book sometimes, so I just kind of like it naked. But what compelled me to get this book when I found it on a thrift store shelf is not only the Eiffel Tower on the cover, but reading the dust jacket matter. It talked about an artist searching for God. So I really commend the late Irving Stone for the achievements that he had writing fiction about well-known and, it turns out, not well-known figures. Because when I looked into who is John Noble, I didn't know anything about him, had never heard his name. There is no biography of John Noble published as far as I can tell. The internet, not a whole lot of information. He has a son, John A. Noble, who is also a painter, and some of his stuff is available for viewing online. But from what I gather, John Noble was his own worst critic, like most creatives, and he destroyed a lot of his own work. Maybe that's why a lot of this stuff doesn't exist. It's hard to say. He also had a sad ending, again, like a lot of creatives, because of his addiction to alcohol. So Irving Stone really must have been digging into the archives. He must have interviewed people who knew him, which was conceivable. This novel was published in the 1940s. And John Noble died, I believe, sometime in the 30s, from Wichita, Kansas. He was a cowboy type, but being from the Great Plains of America in that day and age, an artistic sensibility maybe was not very appreciated. As the novel depicts, his mother, who's English, is the one who encourages his interest in art, and even letting him paint in her nice parlor, so that he can have an indoor studio. At one point, the real John Noble did go off to Paris in the 1890s, early 1900s, to soak in the expat atmosphere, and he moved around in some circles with some starving artists whose names weren't well known at the time. Guys like, Pablo Picasso, Marcel Duchamp. No, not big names in the art world at all. At that point in time, of course, they weren't. So John Noble is considered a post-impressionist, sort of along the lines of Van Gogh. But of the surviving paintings that I was able to see, and the ones that are described in this book, he often took the American plains as a subject, as well as seascapes, paintings of boats, and really beautiful rural landscapes. So the novel really depicts the inner reality of this artist who is searching for something transcendent. At first, he's not sure what that is, but he thinks maybe he's looking for God. But he has all these ups and downs, and it made me wonder if Irving Stone was trying to depict John Noble as, again, like most creatives, struggling mentally with something. He almost seemed bipolar in the way that he was being depicted in the book. Again, I have no way of knowing if this is what he was really like, if these are the things that he was searching for, because he has such high highs and he has really low lows. Um, and it's not super clear though why he drinks, because he's not a continuous drinker. He'll go through periods of alcoholic stupor, basically, where he wakes up in a street and has no idea how he got there. And there's almost nothing in his background, his childhood, or anything that's going on externally to suggest, oh, yeah, this is why he drinks. There's some sort of trauma. Obviously, there's something gnawing at him on the inside. Um, and eventually, it does destroy his life. He has a very loving wife in the book, again, as like a lot of male artists do. Um, but the way the passionate journey is depicted is it's broken down into structures that are really interesting. So, book one, Wichita, the hunger. So, he's hungry for something, doesn't know what. Book two, Paris, the search. Book three, Brittany, where he moved for a while, the treasure. So, he goes through a period of peace and creative well being. And then book four, New York, the reward. And he did end his life living in New York. One thing that I found fascinating, beyond the fact that I think this is such a beautifully written book, Irving Stone, what a writer. Um, but the thing that I found also fascinating is that it depicts John Noble as being a huge force in getting modernist art into this country. So he has a friend in the book, a childhood friend from Wichita, who ends up becoming very wealthy. And I couldn't find any trace of this person either. He may be an invention of the novel. Um, and John convinces him to use his wealth acquiring abstract and modernist art that his friend doesn't understand. It's like, I don't care about this stuff. Why are you making me buy it? Um, John tells him it's an investment and, we need to spread this around. And it turns out these are pieces by Duchamp and Picasso and Matisse and those kinds of guys, the ones that caused a big riot um, in New York when they were exhibited in around 1912, um, and rattled the art establishment quite a bit. But these are the pieces that now are the art establishment. So I would be super curious to learn if John Noble actually did do that. Um, Again, can't find any trace if he was that pivotal in bringing European modernist work to America. But if that's the case, it's a huge shame that he's been forgotten, because not only does it seem like he was a talented artist in his own right, but he has a really big fingerprint on art history and are being able to view European art in this country. So, this is an interesting little blurb from the cover, talking about one of the ways he was actually viewed in that era. So, in spite of his deep spiritual longing, John Noble played the part of a rip roaring wild Westerner all his life, never being seen without the 2-gun holster, which he wore strapped about his magnificent body. He used his guns once to shoot out the lights at the Beaux-Arts ball in Paris, which is depicted in the book. It's a very funny scene. And again to terrorize banks that refused to give him the money he thought was coming to him. He slept beside his 10-gallon Stetson in a buffalo robe, drank prodigiously in cowboy fashion, knew far too intimately the insides of jails in Kansas, Paris, London, Provincetown, and New York, and all because he was ashamed to show his overpowering spiritual hunger to what he believed was a cynical and godless world. So those things he did. He shot up the Beaux-Arts ball and slept in jails and kind of went off the deep end and played this character. He had a persona as this cowboy guy. But how did Irving Stone know or intuit that John Noble had all of this going on inside of him at the same time? That he was searching for something. I mean, I guess it's not really a leap to say that creatives and artists are searching for something transcendent, beyond what the eye can see, and that's what they're trying to translate into their work. But I don't think that's necessarily a given, especially when we hear stories about how badly artists have behaved toward other people, and how egotistical they are. If they're searching for something higher than themselves, they had a really poor way of showing it. Um, so yeah, there are quite a few mysteries surrounding how Irving Stone even constructed this book. I th- but I think there are maybe some excerpts in here. Well, there are excerpts in here from newspaper stories about John Noble that I assume are actual news stories. And this is what he had to say to reporters when his paintings start to become known, and he's credited as being the sort of the leader of this quote new American out of doors school. So he says, to really paint, a man must put his soul into his work. He must paint from the heart rather than according to mathematical rules. But he must never be content with that which meets the outer skin of his eye. He must also create his own world and transcribe that world to canvas. So if Irving Stone was coming across John Noble's own words on this subject, then maybe it isn't that far a leap to say this is what was going on with him in reality. But I highly recommend The Passionate Journey, or really anything by Irving Stone. I have tried reading Agony and the Ecstasy and Lust for Life before, but I never got completely into them. I think because Michelangelo, at least is how he's depicted starting off in the book, it was a little difficult to relate to. And if you've seen the movie version, The Agony and the Ecstasy, he's this sort of larger than life figure who, sees his conception of the Sistine Chapel in the clouds. I mean, it's a very lofty, divinely inspired moment. It's beautiful, but he doesn't really seem all that human in a way. And with Van Gogh in Lust for Life, I just also found it hard to get into because Van Gogh was so strange that I mean his work is so beautiful, but he's so again hard to. It's like just hard to crawl into his skin, I suppose you could say. But I found myself immediately attracted to this character because he seems more like me, like people I know, um, and maybe because he is obscure. He doesn't have this, huge reputation to precede him, um, bogging down his humanity, I suppose you could say. Um, the Passionate Journey is not just about a journey from rags to riches. It doesn't really ever do that. It's not a story of I struggled and then became enlightened. No, the passionate journey is literally the journey of life. And passion means suffering. So when we're passionate about something, we love it, but we also suffer for it. And that's true of his art and it's true of his life. And I think that's true of every life.